From London, this is the Orwellians podcast. I'm Roland Elliott Brown. My guest today is Petr Petrenko. Petr is a lawyer from St. Petersburg and an anti-war campaigner who organizes public events in London in support of political prisoners in Russia. Petr holds an LLM in human rights law from Queen Mary University of London and has 10 years experience practicing and teaching law in Russia. Petr has organized a letter writing project that helps people to communicate with and support Russians imprisoned for criticizing the war in Ukraine. He also holds daily anti-war vigils outside Russian embassies. Petr, welcome.
Hi, Roland. Thank you for the introduction and for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. So, Petr, I met you last November at a Ukraine solidarity event called Try Me for Treason, which was about the final court statements of Russians who were sentenced for speaking out against the war. Maybe we could start with the Russian legal landscape. Tell us about the new laws that Russia introduced in 2022 that led to so many people being prosecuted for criticizing the war.
Well, Roland, let me begin by saying that when you're dealing with a country without the strict adherence to the rule of law, discussing the formal statutes is not that informative. Because by definition, those statutes are not followed. Because there is no rule of law in the strict, let's say, British sense. And so Russia is one of those countries. And another thing we have to say in the beginning to set the boundaries and to guide the understanding is that to discuss laws, you have to have separation of powers in the first place. And in Russia, we're lacking this as well. So what I mean is what comes from the parliament here in the UK must be followed by the executive. And in Russia, the parliament also exists and the executive branch of power also exists. But they mostly exist as labels and in essence is very different thing. And it's hard to understand it with the same approach as you can try to understand any other country which is more advanced in terms of its adherence to the rule of law, human rights, and everything. Well, but answering your question and probably reframing it a bit, not to discuss particular statutes. There are a lot of statutes which have been enacted since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. There are a lot, but as I said, not all of them are followed precisely. Not all of them inform you about what's happening in Russia at the moment. And it's more, probably makes more sense to talk about the limits, how far the authorities feel they can go in their relationships while dealing with individuals. And these limits are continuously expanding in Russia at the moment. And of course, it's external aggression against Ukraine. It deteriorated things inside of Russia. It makes more things possible for the authorities to commit, to put more pressure on individuals and what left from the civil society there.
Your initial comments took me back to Orwell's introduction to the Ukrainian edition of Animal Farm, where he explains to his Ukrainian readers that people in England translate everything that goes on in a totalitarian country into British terms, and that's, of course, they really can't understand totalitarianism or authoritarianism. So I guess the way I framed my question fell slightly into
understandable.
That fallacy.
Yeah. But the reason of our talk is to understand each other, and it's only natural to come with your own terms and to discuss things based on your background and your understanding of things.
Of course, I'm well aware of corruption and telephone justice and the lack of separation of powers, and all that. So right. So, well, tell us about the laws that were introduced, and how they changed the situation in Russia. It may not only be the laws that changed the situation, but delve into it. So we had laws against discrediting the armed forces. That's one of the terms that's used. Dissemination of knowingly false information about the armed forces. That's another term that's used. Public actions aimed at discrediting the armed forces. Calls for sanctions against Russia and its citizens or entities. So some of these will land you in prison. So what types of anti-war action are landing people in prison?
Well, basically any type. And the borderline is that you are against the invasion, against the dictatorship, any part of it, and you are openly expressing it, or not necessarily even openly. You might do something privately and they'll find out. And then they'll find a particular article for you. And it's not necessary that this article exists already and it precisely corresponds to your actions. Because if you're against what's happening, they will find a way to prosecute you for that, for being against the authorities in some way. That's how it works. So those statutes, those articles are more like a decoration to make this public performance that we adhere to the rule of law. We not completely abandon it. We have courts. We have these legislative institutions, and our courts are independent, and they are only following the laws we have. And our legislative authorities, they come directly from the people by being elected, and so it's all democratic, and you have nothing to complain about. But in reality, the question is, do you support what's happening? Are you against it? And if you are against, you are risking basically everything, because it's a lottery how you would end up with what article and with what sentence, or you'll be just fined. And fines also can be significant, and they put a burden on anyone who received them. That's how it works.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense of how many people have been imprisoned for criticizing the war?
Well, for the war precisely, I don't know. I don't have these figures, but in general, with some political component to it, based on the latest data from, let's say, Memorial Political Prisoner Support Project, it is around, the figures are around 5,000 people being in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying it again, it's not only prosecution of those who were against the war, but it's more general about political repression.
Right.
And those are only known cases, because not every case immediately is being immediately attracts public attention, and so a person being immediately added to the databases we have about political repression. And so the estimation is there is the same amount of cases we don't know about at the moment.
Yeah. So it seems like we're looking at thousands of prosecutions.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's not about prosecutions, it's about people being imprisoned at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thousands of people imprisoned now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it also includes not only Russians, it includes Ukrainians being captured in Ukraine and brought to Russia and prosecuted for who knows what.
Yeah. Tell me about those Ukrainians. Are you referring to people from the occupied territories?
Yep.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
not only, there are a lot of Ukrainians who lived in Russia
Yeah.
by the time of the invasion, and sometimes they are being persecuted too.
So naturally, Ukrainians who were living in Russia at the time the war started were inclined to protest against the war, and they were prosecuted. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So give me an example of the type of action, the type of statement. Just give us some case studies. So what have people said that has led them to be imprisoned?
Well, it can be anything, and any type of action, any type of just speech, any content you share online. An example, mm, an example would be Putin is a dickhead or something like that.
Mhm.
The classic one, and well, it might lead you to prison, being said out loud in Russia. And anything is about what's being called in Russia a special military operation, any critique of it, of any government officials who are leading these efforts to uh, attack Ukraine, or any just internal matters, criticizing, because the life, I mean, the invasion, it attracts a lot of attention, but the life also, internal life, it goes on, and people are criticizing some internal things, and they end up in prison as well.
Mhm. I mean, I can think of a couple of high-profile cases early on from 2022. There was Andrei Gorinov, right? He was a Moscow City councilman, I think.
Mm, he's Alexei, actually.
My mistake, Alexei Gorinov.
Yeah.
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 Uh,
And he's prosecuted. He's currently in prison for public speech, if I'm not mistaken, which took place, which he gave during the council meeting
mhm,
in Moscow, where he said something like, I'm not quoting it directly, but he said something like they were discussing some celebration,
mhm.
some just regular mm, local celebration. And he said something like, there is an ongoing invasion. How can we celebrate anything? Something along these lines.
Yeah.
And he received something around 7 years of imprisonment. I'm not talking exact numbers here, but just giving you a sense of what
Mhm.
happened. And he's still in prison, and he's kept in Rubtsovsk in Altai Krai. That's far away from Moscow, and it makes hard to visit him there and to support him.
Yeah. There was Sasha Skotchelenko, the artist who changed price tags in a supermarket to very small anti-war statements. I think
Mm,
she's since been released.
yeah, she's been released when I don't like this word because the word exchange,
Right.
prisoners exchange, because exchange in my mind, it correlates, it conveys equality, that you are giving something of equal value. And in case with the prisoners, this thing, it's not equal, because Russia received criminals, and some people were practically deported from Russia, being Russian nationals.
Yeah.
They got released, of course, but they were deported without opportunity to go back, without
Right.
their will.
So
And
this
Sasha
is
was
yeah.
one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the prisoner exchange that happened toward the end of the Joe Biden administration, and well, some political prisoners and journalists were exchanged, to use the word you dislike, for some spies and assassins. Yeah. Yeah.
Mainly those who hold other citizenship, maybe together with Russian citizenship, but maybe some other citizenship as well.
Yeah.
Like Vladimir Karamurza held
Mhm.
British citizenship and was um, released as well.
Yeah. So I just raised these cases to show how tr- how severe the prosecutions are, how severe their treatment is. Like these people did very small things. They made very small marginal statements against the war, and they were brutally made example of.
Uh, well, I wouldn't say small because it sounds like it a bit downplays what they did because
I don't mean to downplay
yeah,
their
yeah, I
courage.
understand.
Yeah.
I'm just um, adding some context to it because when you live in this environment where every act of just publicly sharing your opinions, when you know it for sure that you might be prosecuted for that, every act of just resistance, it is a very significant act, and
It's Orwell might have phrased it like a revolutionary act.
could be, yeah,
Yeah.
because no one knows what particular action would start the change,
Yeah.
and every action can trigger that. And especially when we live in a different time than Orwell with social media, every act, uh, even the smallest insignificant, like you say, act may be captured on video. It might get traction by social media algorithm and lead people to change the world, basically.
Yeah. So you're in touch with people in Russian prisons. So tell us about them, their lives in prison. What are conditions like? How are they being treated? What are their connections with family like?
Mm, yeah. Well, as I said, we cannot speak about the rule of law in Russia, and that for prisons and other facilities, it means that every place is different from one another.
Hmm.
What I mean is that every person being imprisoned suffer in their own way and experience their own conditions because there are, of course, rules which are mandatory for any facility, but without the rule of law, no one actually controls it, how it is followed. I mean, effectively controls it because there are a lot of institutions that are supposed to control it. And there are courts, of course, to just supervise that. But it doesn't work this way. So that allows to create a completely different environment in any facility.
Hmm.
And it's not only the difference between the different facilities, but also a difference in relation to particular individuals, to particular prisoners in these facilities, because it often depends on how the person who's imprisoned behaves in that institution. It depends how they are treated by this institution, and they can experience all sorts of things depending on who they are and why are they there. Um, well, basic, the very basic restrictions they include. I'll start just from the what looks like a very natural part of our life is that you don't have internet there. You don't have social media. You cannot scroll things. You don't have your mobile. But also, more importantly, you cannot be regularly for as long as you want in touch with your family and friends, spend time together. You are mostly spending time with the people you never selected to spend time with and who might be not very nice people. Um, what else? You do
Can
not,
pol- can
yeah,
political prisoners expect to be housed with non-political prisoners? In other words, are they in prisons where they're surrounded by, uh, let's say, career criminals in the
yeah,
conventional
I got
sense?
it. Well, it works differently in different institutions, but typically political prisoners are serving their first sentences, and based on that, they're typically separated from people who are convicted repeatedly, like you say, career criminals. So
Hmm.
those people are typically separated from those who are serving their first sentences. In terms of whether they are being kept with other political prisoners, different institutions follow different approaches here. In some institutions, I mean, in facilities, different types of facilities, authorities try to separate political prisoners from others. In other facilities, they're trying to separate political prisoners from other political prisoners. So they
Hmm.
follow different approaches based on their own understanding of what they're trying to achieve. Yeah. So sometimes political prisoners are being kept with regular criminals. Sometimes they're being kept in solitary confinement. Sometimes they're being kept with just all other people who might be there.
Can you give us an example? Tell us about someone you know. You don't have to say their name, but tell us about someone you're in touch with and what they're experiencing.
Mm, yeah. What they're experiencing. So they're waking up, let's say 6 a.m. They have to clean their faces very um, super fast, really fast. They do not control their like morning routine. It's all scheduled for them by the authorities. Then they have to very again quickly to deal with their beds, and then they have their breakfast served, and it's not nice food they just ordered. It's just the in many cases it's just the cheapest uh, meals available to authorities, and no one cares to cook it in a proper way. So many people they depend on the parcels and other and just food being given to them from outside, from the outside, or on money transfers to have this opportunity to order food for themselves. So
Hmm.
that's how it works. Um, Also, what else? Depending, I'm describing basically pre-trial detention. Then you're just spending time in your prison cell, and it might be really small, and it might be overcrowded, and you might be there with smokers and being non-smoker, and sometimes you would have a TV with the state-controlled channels, and your other inmates you're sharing the space with would like to watch it all day, and it can be really loud, and you wouldn't really like that. Well, uh, sometimes your particular detention center would have a library from where you can order books, but the selection and collection is always or most of the time limited. By the way, most of the libraries still have Orwell and his 1984 uh, always tops all the lists for political prisoners. Everyone reads that. And we're even currently compiling kind of article about it where prisoners, Russia's political prisoners, they're giving feedback on Orwell, mostly 1984, then goes Animal Farm, and it's rarely that anything else is available. But those, especially 1984, is available in most of the facilities. So,
That's amazing. What do you think they're getting out of it?
uh, out of the reading,
Yeah.
any reading you mean, or just
No, out of
1984?
Orwell.
Well, based on the comments we received, people, well, um, what they share in their reviews is that they don't really like the ending, and they don't like this feeling of that there is no hope, and so they see naturally a lot of similarities in how the world is described with their experience being imprisoned in today's Russia. But they would like to see the world slightly different in terms of the hope and the opportunity for change.
Yeah, so it's a bleak work, so that they recognize the system of control, but yeah, but Winston is destroyed. But there's another more optimistic reading of the end of 1984, which is that there's an appendix, and the
Hmm.
appendix is a history of Newspeak, and the fact that someone is writing history of Newspeak means that the regime ended.
Ah, okay. I should tell everyone about that. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
So tell us about the letter writing workshops. So how did you get involved in letter writing workshops in London? What happens at those workshops?
uh, well, um, when the full-scale invasion began in 2022, we were looking for different opportunities. How can we be more involved? How can we help? And with what's going on? And we found ourselves in. So we decided to stick to this unique link to Russia other people don't have. So people from Russia living outside of Russia, they have this link. They speak their language. They still have some network in Russia, some connection, some understanding of how things work. And so for them, for me, it is natural and essential to use this unique position um, to support people inside of Russia who are against the war. Basically, that was the initial intention. But of course, then it would be not really reasonable to separate people who protest against the war from the people who protest Putin's regime,
Yeah.
and you have to support everyone. And the basic idea is very simple, that you cannot expect real change when people are left behind. Those who are your natural allies and who um, protested already, they anyone and have to be supported. No
Mhm.
one should be left behind, because otherwise you cannot expect other people to join. If they see that that Ivanov guy protested and ended up in prison and no one cares, then it creates frustration and chilling effect, and no one wants to join the case. And it's not that we are interested in many people joining in terms of getting imprisoned themselves. No, of course not. But it is very important for people to Russia to see that mm, many people outside of Russia um, express solidarity with them,
Mhm.
and I understand their condition and see their efforts and support them.
Yeah.
And these letter writing workshops, they allow us to introduce what's happening in Russia to people here in London and in different countries, because letter writing workshops nowadays, they take place all over the world. And this is a window for people from outside of Russia to see what happens and to practically participate in it. So you not only learn something about what's happening far away, but you immediately um, receive an opportunity to actively participate and to make your meaningful, very practical contribution to what's happening by supporting one particular individual. with whom you share the ideas of peace and freedom.
Yeah. So let's go through the process of one of these letter writing meetings. So someone goes to one of these meetings for the first time. What do they experience, and how do they decide who they're going to write to first?
Yeah. Typically, newcomers, they have several questions. They come with several questions, and we as organizers, we are trying to address these questions. And the initial conversation, it typically goes around the question of who to write, what to write, and how it works,
Mhm.
how this message goes through, what shall we expect next? What are the next steps? Uh, we are typically starting from the question of who to write, and we started by saying that by coming here, by joining our event, you had some idea about what's happening, and
Mhm.
maybe you had some names in your head already. And these names, they motivated you already to come here. And just our advice is to build on this initial motivation and to write to those people whose stories are already familiar to you and whose stories brought you here.
Mhm.
But for those who don't really know anyone in prison in Russia, we have several tools to use to select a person they would like to write to. For
Mhm.
some people, it is important who this person will be in terms of their gender, age, profession, interests, or their actions, their articles used against them, their region where they're being held, because Russia is very big. Uh, and so we are helping them to select a person they would love to communicate with based on all that. But for most of the people, they just agree to randomly select a person they would like to communicate with. And we have a tool for that, which just by coin flip gives you a random name, and you just learn a bit about this person and write to them. That works for most of the people who come. And the next question typically discussed is, what shall I write? And most of the people, ironically, they are framing it not like what shall I write, but what I shouldn't write. And we are trying to go back to this initial and proper question, what shall I write? Because
Mhm.
our purpose is not to train censors, but to help you to write your letter. And you should know what to write, not what you shouldn't write. That won't help you to write anything, if you understand what I mean. So our basic, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess the difficulty might be that the natural inclination is to start by talking about the war, and that's the thing that's probably most likely to run afoul of the prison censors.
Mm, yeah, that's correct. So, but that can be answered as well by answering the question of what to write. And
Mhm.
and what our advice is very simple. So um, the the best letter, initial letter, will be a letter where you are briefly introducing yourself, sharing only the details you would like to share with anyone, including Russian authorities, because everything you write will be read. And if you don't want to share something, you just don't write that. Introducing yourself, and then sharing some preferably positive experience, some recent experience you had. And we um, the the experience is better to be just a regular. For example, you read a book, you watched a movie, you had a nice walk in a park, you spent some time attending some event you liked, something very down to earth, very regular. You spend some time with your dog or whatever.
It's a glimpse of another life.
Yep.
Yeah.
Some very casual conversation. And in England, in the UK, it's very easy to explain to people because what it reminds immediately is a small talk and all this culture associated with small talk. Because when you meet someone like in a coffee shop, you are not starting to exchange remarks on Putin with them immediately. You are talking about the weather.
Am I not supposed to do that when I'm talking to strangers in a cafe?
Yeah, you are talking, most conversations, they begin from discussing the weather here, right? And especially when we have this heat wave. Uh, so that goes well with letters to political prisoners in Russia. Discussing the weather is much better than starting by discussing the casualties on the front line or how would you prefer Vladimir Putin to be tried in which city and by what tribunal and something like that, or calling him names or whatever. All these things, they go without saying, because otherwise other people, they don't write to political prisoners who don't share this attitude towards what's happening. So everything you have to you have this urge to express in this letter about all these events unfolding events, it goes without saying.
It's implied. Yeah.
It's all implied. So you'd better share something else, something which would allow a person, even for one moment, to forget about what's happening and forget about what surrounds them, about this unpleasant environment they are in at the moment, about all these conditions, to forget about it and to read about some normal, regular stuff, like everything they cannot do at the moment, that it still exists and they have this chance to go back to it. Well, but anyway, we have this, we hold these workshops offline, so you have a lot of people around, typically with a similar urge to discuss what's happening with on the front line or inside of Russia, what new laws were enacted, what happened where, who was killed, who was bombed, and so on and so forth. And you can discuss all these things with people around you. Just don't put it into your letter because it will typically, in most cases, it will reduce its chances to pass through the censorship. And I'm saying in most of the cases, because in some cases you can discuss everything. As I said before, there are no, it can be said that every facility, every censor, they follow the same rules as they should. They don't. So in many places you can discuss everything. But again, there is another possible complication to that, which is that you are not in the same position with the person you are writing to, and your letter shouldn't harm them. And the content you select for your letter, it may provoke them to reply on a similar topic, sharing their thoughts, and they are in a vulnerable position while they're doing this.
Yeah.
And it won't be a surprise if they eventually would be prosecuted for the for what they wrote to you. There are no such cases at the moment, but why not?
Yeah.
So if the purpose of this letter is to support this person, just share some regular positive, preferably. Life is not always, and it's not completely, and it's totally not positive at the moment, but finding something positive and sharing it brings joy on the other side and helps to get through. And that's the
Yeah.
purpose.
So how does the letter go from one of your workshops to the prison? What is the path?
There are several online options to send these letters, and we are mostly facilitating the use of them.
Mhm.
Because for many people, those options are not accessible because they are mainly with the Russian interface. Some of them strictly require Russian phone numbers. Some of them strictly require Russian payment methods. And so without facilitation, a person from the UK would have a lot of barriers to use those platforms. And
Mhm.
in our case, you're just hanging your letter to the organizers of the event, and then it goes by the channels available for this particular letter, because not every facility in Russia is available via online services. Different online services allow you to communicate with different prisoners. Some prisoners are only available by traditional offline post services. And there is this link still exists, so you can send letters from the UK, from London to Russia, and you can send these letters directly to the facilities where political prisoners are being kept. So but we don't use this option too much, because the post, especially in Russia, is less reliable than these online services. Yeah, it costs more and it takes more time to deliver this message via regular post than via online services. So
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
the preferred way at this moment is online services. But with those people who are not available online, we are relying on traditional post.
Right. And when the letter arrives at the prison, what procedure does it go through there? Tell us about the censorship that exists in Russian prisons.
Mm. So every act of communication mm, it goes through authorities, and every letter have to be read. And as I said, in some facilities, the practice is stricter than in others. So they typically read everything, but some would, for example, if they find something they don't like, in some facilities, they can just mark this out and still hang the letter, the rest of it, to the prisoner. And in
Right. So it's
some,
redacted, like blacked out.
yeah, blacked out.
Yeah.
And in others, they would just trash the whole letter. Um, that's how it works differently. And some prisoners are being deprived of letters, and that's one of the ways to mm,
So it's
continue
like
to
a
put pressure
punishment.
on them. Yeah,
Yeah.
and just like a punishment, which is not actually regulated, but they just pretending that no letter passed this censorship. And of course, you can, like with any action or inaction of government sergeant, you can file a complaint against it, but it goes to the same basically court, which already told you you're a criminal when you are not, and with the same result basically. But some people are trying these routes, and in some cases, it brings some improvements. So letters are the communication is being restored as a result of these complaints in some cases.
Yeah.
But in some cases, with your complaints, you can worsen the situation for political prisoner, because depriving you from your mail is not the most severe form of punishment. You can be basically beaten up, and it is a regular practice to mm, experience this physical interferences when you are in prison in Russia. And there are particular facilities where it is a regular routine practice to beat up the prisoners.
Yeah. So, are are there specific types of people that it's dangerous for political prisoners to be in touch with? For example, if I'm a Western writer or journalist who's publicly criticized the war, is it dangerous for them to receive a letter from me?
Um, well, there's another thing also about how our workshops go.
Hmm.
So we typically do not send anything which won't pass censorship as we
Hmm.
know it in a particular institution, and we do not send anything which can harm the prisoner.
Yeah.
So after you wrote your letter while attending our workshop, this letter will be read by us, and we will slightly edit it if needed.
Hmm.
So if there is anything there, so that's why we are just telling people to write whatever they want. Anyway, we'll edit if they write something which is completely unacceptable. It is easier than to explain every detail, and it's
Yeah.
almost impossible to explain every detail of how it works because it works differently in every institution.
Right. But my
Uh,
question is about the identity of the letter writer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no one actually asks you about your identity, so you are selecting your identity yourself. You can, I mean, no one asks for your ID. That's what I
Right.
meant. They typically ask, typically your name is a part of your letter,
Yeah.
essential part of your letter, but no one checks your ID, so you can be anyone. And if you believe that your identity somehow threatens this communication, you can choose another one.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah. So these exchanges are covering quite a lot of distance, geographically, sometimes culturally. Tell me about some of the correspondences that have come out of the letter writing campaign. What type of exchanges are people having? What's interesting for the prisoners? What kind of messages are going back and forth between London and Russian prisons?
Yeah, we've just discussed initial letters, and of course, then you might expect that eventually you will receive a reply. Sometimes, in the fastest cases, it takes a week or a couple of days even, or the fastest case we had was the same day. But typically, the letters that turnaround is like 2 weeks.
Hmm.
So every fortnight there will be some exchange. So either you are writing them or they're replying to you. And when this correspondence begins, and when letters are getting written both ways, it works differently from initial letters because in every letter, people typically answer some questions and raise some other questions. And it
Hmm.
goes back and forth with these questions, and people are discussing different. They just typically they focus on some common interests and discuss them.
Hmm.
So they can discuss books typically because people are reading a lot while being in prison. They can discuss movies. They can discuss like some regular news because letters are also an important channel for people inside to receive the news about the outside world and discussing the news, but in a more, let's say, neutral way than you might expect, just in a more kind of factual. So what happens? Just Putin met Trump, let's say, not some critical opinions about Putin being met by Trump, something like that. So it works for the censorship and for the authorities. Mm, but again, in some cases, you can openly write whatever you want, and no one would interrupt you. So that's how it works. And some people they are exchanging letters for years, and some people are continuing to communicate after the release of a particular prisoner. So in some cases, it becomes a connection for life.
Yeah.
People are becoming true friends. So that's another way for us to advertise this activity, because this activity is actually not only about this political part, about the war, about the dictatorship. It's also about making friends,
Mm-hmm.
true friends, which can stay for you, with you for your entire life. Um, and you know how people in big cities like London are being lonely, and communicating with someone far away might make sense to just deal with your own issues. And many people actually who write letters while being free, they report they feel support from this activity themselves. So it's not only about supporting those who are in prison, but also it is about mutual support, because those who write letters during our workshops, they also feel better after that, typically.
So it sounds like some of the connections that are forming are pretty profound.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
Yeah. So all of this has emerged out of a taboo, right? This taboo that the Russian government has imposed about discussing the war in any meaningful way. It seems obvious that whatever taboos the Russian government has imposed on society when it comes to talking about the war, they can't last forever. Russians living in Russia are eventually going to want to talk about what their country has experienced over the last 4 years, negative feelings about the war, negative feelings about the consequences for the country. How do you imagine Russia's wartime censorship coming to an end?
Well, eventually it will end with like everything ends. But we are not the focus of our initiative, and it's not because it's a different um, how to say, it's a different type of activity to give your predictions of on. It is even you can call it a degree in terms of academic life, a degree in how Putin's regime will end, because there are so many people who are discussing it and giving their predictions of how it will end, and you can just browse through YouTube in Russian. You will find so many, and they are recording their programs weekly, some of them even daily, and every day they're telling you how Putin's regime will end. And we're not competing with those people. We are in a different, in a different, slightly working in a slightly different format. From so it's not my cup of tea to make these predictions.
Yeah,
The only thing I know for sure that it will end, and our purpose here and now is to use every resource available to us to contribute to that, and to keep going no matter what.
right. I think my question was getting at something slightly different. Let me see
Okay,
if I can articulate it better.
just a second. Can I just fix something here? Just a second.
Yeah. So I'm getting at a slightly different idea. When I talk about how does the wartime censorship come to an end, it's not necessarily about how the Putin regime comes to an end, although it might be connected with that. I guess it's likely to be connected with that. Uh, but I'm more interested in where the pressure is coming from. So this silence that's imposed from above, it's imposed by new laws, it's imposed by the authorities, it creates pressures. And I'm curious what you think, which of those pressures are the most acute? Like, where is the taboo imposing the most pressure on society? Where is it most likely to face resistance? Which topics are people finding it most frustrating to be silent about?
Hmm. Okay. Well, mm, people are adapting to everything, but some people refuse to adapt and they protest. And it's hard to say at this stage when so many things are already prohibited to what will end this up. And you have to also consider that this censorship, it's not the only thing which puts pressure on people. Other things being what they pay for electricity, for their food, for their housing, for everything, what opportunities their kids have, and so on and so forth. And those things might be decisive as well. Um, and those things are deteriorating with, I would say, but it's not again, it's outside of the uh, expertise. But those things might be decisive. I mean, economic factors. And you were saying that you see the opportunity for the current regime to continue without this censorship. And I'm not
Well,
really sure
not
how.
exactly.
It's hard to imagine
Yeah.
how it might happen that the regime is the same and there is no censorship and you can criticize the war or the war ended somehow and how it ended and why is it possible now to say things about the regime and why everyone have to be released now who were saying these things and who were committing these practical actions to stop the war. um, well, I I
it
I
seems
I I
unlikely.
rather I rather see those things happening together.
Yeah. Uh, it seems unlikely that it would change while Putin is in power, but dictatorships can run on a long time. They go through different phases. They go through different periods. Um, I mean, the thing that strikes me is death, like the scale of death, the number of Russians who have died fighting in this war, and it seems that wanting to talk about those deaths and the causes behind those deaths could end up being the main form of pressure.
Mm, well, it could. It could, but it's hard to say what should be the scale and what is the scale now because this information, it's they're trying to hide this information. Of course, there are some estimates about what are the rates of casualties during the invasion, but it is hidden from the society uh, and authorities. They trying their best not to give these numbers away. Um, so it mostly works as an individual tragedy for every particular family who uh, who lost their loved ones. Not and people don't see the whole picture because the whole picture is hidden from them in terms of these losses. And those are not really people who are interested in investigating things. So and there is this thing with the different bubbles. So there are investigative journalists who are trying to get these numbers. But those people for whom those numbers matter the most, who lost people or whose relatives are fighting in this war, they wouldn't read the results of these investigations because they are living in different worlds, practically. You know what I mean?
Right. There's a very different information bubble. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
of course, there's no guarantee that the death of a loved one in a war uh, becomes a reason to oppose the regime. It might be leveraged against the West, for example.
Mm. Yeah, it depends how it is being framed, because in many cases it's framed like they died being heroes and so on and so forth. So becoming against what's happening makes you against the memory about them, the positive memory about them, and it's unacceptable for you, for your identity, or being a person who lost someone in a just participating in this just or whatever narrative is there. War. Yeah.
And
So it's,
there's always the tension as well between wanting to know, like the spirit of glasnost, and not wanting to know, like the resistance to unhappy information about one's country's past. So, for example, the resistance to facing Stalin's crimes. Like there was a book by, I think it was by David Satter, called "It Was a Long Time Ago and It Never Happened Anyway."
hmm. Yeah, that's the approach that might work. So it's hard to say. And this group of society whose relatives are participating in the war, it is very distant from me as well. So I'm not really truly understand how they think or how they act and react, because I don't have that much connections with people from this group. So
Hmm.
I mostly communicate with the people who are against it, and for these people, it all goes without saying. So you don't have to provide for them the uh, statistics or any numbers. They don't need it. They just know that the invasion is wrong in the first place, and without it, there would be no consequences we all are experiencing, and especially people in Ukraine. Um, so yeah,
Do you think there will be an appetite for a new form of glasnost?
well, it already exists, but we're talking about different parts of society. Of course, there is a part of society which wants to make this all public, uh, all external atrocities, all internal crimes against its own people, make it known, and many people are working to document it right now, because documenting it in present makes some things you wouldn't know them in future without them being documented right now when they happen. Um, but whether this demand will be more demand for that, it's hard to say, and we only can hope for that, and put our actions into spreading information we have about the war and about the repression, and try to involve as many people as we can, and yeah, hope for the best.
All right. Thanks, Pyotr. So, if people want to get involved in letter writing, where should they find you online?
So we typically advertise it on my Facebook page. You
Hmm.
can add me on Facebook and you'll see it. And if in future we'll develop something, some separate project page, we'll add it to the description to this video, I think, as well.
Hmm.
It will be possible in future.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Pyotr. So, to support the Orwellians, you can subscribe to the Orwellians Substack at theorwellians.substack.com. You can help sustain the podcast by becoming a paid subscriber, or donate via the Stripe link in the show notes. I'm on X at Roland E. Brown, on Instagram at Roland Elliott Brown. You can read my long form articles in New Lines magazine. My book with Fuel Publishing is Godless Utopia, Soviet Anti-Religious Propaganda. Um, Thanks very much, Pyotr.
Thank you, Roland.